Yo, we're back. Chapter 4. Do you need to take a pregnant break? Well, not an expert on the topic. My wife just finished being pregnant. We've got like a 3.5-month-old baby girl. She's dope. So I can share some of the experiences that I noticed while my wife was pregnant, and because she trained throughout her whole pregnancy. This whole chapter, and kind of Stacy alludes to it in the beginning, but then she actually goes deeper because it's useful to have more information. Should you train while you're pregnant? Yes. Train in a way that's safe and that you're comfortable with. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Like, keep training while you're pregnant. If you've never trained before and you want to start training while you're pregnant, you can still do that. You'll just want to be more conservative in your exercise selection, meaning not doing a bunch of crazy stuff, like not joining a high intensity boot camp if you're untrained, but going and like getting some yoga, getting some Pilates, getting some gentle strength training, like going through machine circuits, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Makes a ton of sense because you aren't as in tune with training and its effects on your body. Whereas if you're highly athletic or just a consistent weight room lady or consistently training in some fashion, just keep doing it.
Yep.
You can train during pregnancy, and you should, pending serious complications. What are serious complications? You'll know.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
your OBGYN will be on top of it, or your baby doc, whatever you're working with. If you're an athlete, keep getting after it. If you've never trained before, keep it simple. It's good for you. It's good for the baby. I thought this was pretty cool. It stimulates exercise, physical activity, stimulates placental growth and functions, and has a positive effect on baby's organ development.
Yep.
Which is sweet. You got, I don't know,
I thought it was
PhD
super interesting.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of the, for lack of better terms, like old style of thinking around this topic was almost thinking that exercise would be detrimental to growth because there would be increased demands for oxygen from training, which means baby's not getting what it needs, right?
Yep.
Or changing blood flow distribution. And although there might be some truth to that, it shows that, you know, women who regularly exercise throughout their pregnancy have a much better outcome than those who don't. So it completely takes that myth and flips it on its head.
Yeah. It's pretty sick. So all pregnant women want to do what's best for their baby. My wife, like, she was focusing on diet, vitamins, getting enough sleep, everything. And a really simple thing that you can do is stay physically active, and it's going to make your placenta work better, and it's going to help your baby's development, which is pretty sick.
It helps baby's endocrine function too as they develop, which I thought was really cool.
I didn't catch that. That is pretty cool. Which is a huge flip on its head. Like, we interviewed Sherry Walsh. She's in her 70s, and up until she was like 25 years old, she was told not to run because it would be bad for reproduction. So we've come a long way, guys.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
And then there's always the question of how much is too much. And the main thing is use common sense and listen to your body. Can you work out too intensely? Probably could, but your body has mechanisms put into place that will not allow you to. For my wife, she got round ligament pain and it's called lightning crotch. So just occasionally walking would just like would hurt pretty bad. So by halfway through her second trimester, she could not just go for walks anymore. It just wasn't working well. So she would go stationary bike at the gym nearby, and she'd sit on a bike with a bigger seat, a little more upright, because she had a baby in her belly. So it changed. She just had to change her positioning so that it worked for what she was working on.
Yeah, I thought one thing that was pretty interesting, because Stacy recommends getting, roughly 30 minutes of aerobic exercise.
Most days per week.
Most days per week. So if you're scaling that on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as effort level, somewhere around a 7.
Yep.
Which I think is pretty cool. And once again, people are concerned about like increased blood volume and oxygen demands and effects on the cardiovascular system. And one thing that I didn't even think about is the fact that as belly grows, then you have decreased ability for like inspiratory reserve volume. You literally can't use your diaphragm as well to bring in as much oxygen. I didn't even think about that. So as you mentioned earlier, there are kind of self-limiting factors as far as intensity goes. And Stacy makes the point that it's very hard to become anaerobic in your training intensity while going through pregnancy. So the take-home point is continue to train. You should be training moderately hard, 7 out of 10 in your cardiovascular, and including some resistance training if you feel familiar with the movements, making sure that you're doing things that you're confident in.
Yep, absolutely. She recommends 2 days of resistance training per week. If you've never trained before, do it on machines.
Yep.
Hard to mess those up. If you're an Olympic weightlifter and you're doing snatches, you can do them through your first trimester, no problem. Second trimester, your bar path probably has to change because there's something in the way. And then it comes down to use a dumbbell, use a kettlebell, don't use a barbell. If you are an Olympic lifter and your bar path is changing, you don't really want to grease that groove. So just changing your implement keeps the energy systems alive. And then post-pregnancy, that's a whole another chapter that we'll get into. And the things to avoid are contact sports, scuba diving. I put gravity sports, so like downhill mountain biking, downhill skiing as always.
Yep.
Talked about, and then high altitude training. I'm not sure why with the high altitude training, but even when I was out, so when my baby was 5 days old, I had her up on top of Grandeur Peak, so I've been out hiking with her the whole time. And people are like, the altitude, I'm not sure what that is, but it's always in there, so it's worth keeping an eye on. My wife, for the gravity sports, just a little aside, my wife was probably 8 weeks pregnant last spring. We were up at Alta. We're doing the traverse over to rope line, and she was totally capable. But it was a wind blown day, so some aspects no powder. It was just like ice. And on the traverse, I was like, "Yo, there's a rock right here. Don't worry about it. Just if you split your skis, you can go right past it." Well, she's 8-9 weeks pregnant. She gets to that rock, and instead of splitting it, she tries to hockey stop, and it's very steep right there. So she pushes her tips into the top of the traverse and flips backwards onto a 50-degree slope that's icy. And I was standing there like, oh no, this is the worst possible outcome. And time slowed down, and she probably slid 30 yards, and she turtled and got her skis down and stopped, which was sweet. Because if she hadn't, she was about 2 seconds from terminal velocity and just 1,000 feet down.
Yeah.
There weren't trees to hit. But it's I don't know. She's pregnant. It would have been concerning.
Scary.
So she stopped. She stood up. She handled it great. She got out of there, skied down, did awesome. So she's a capable skier. She does great. But if she had tomahawked for 1,000 feet with a pregnant or with a baby in there, we would have needed to go to the hospital. It could have been bad. It wasn't bad. So make good decisions.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have taken over there. That was my fault. And then she had a note on very athletic women can keep getting after it, no problem. Don't pick up a new endurance sport once you're pregnant. Once you hit your second trimester, ligaments, joints start to get a little bit looser. So doing a new repetitive action could create some unnecessary joint problems was kind of my takeaway there. Keep doing core work. On top of that, find a pelvic floor specialist and work with them. So all of my friends that have had babies in the last year or so, including my wife, I made sure to get them set up with a pelvic floor specialist as soon as they knew they were pregnant, because there's good things that you can do to keep that healthy while you're pregnant, and then you're set up with somebody that you know and have a trusting relationship with postpartum. So Erica met with Danon, and my wife is Erica. She met with her pelvic floor specialist 4 days postpartum, 5 days postpartum. So we were able to really get on top of that, and that's been incredibly helpful for Erica.
Yeah.
When Erica's lightning crotch came up and round ligament pain, and she had a lot of hip issues, the pelvic floor specialist was able to help her immensely to keep her active throughout her whole pregnancy, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then kind of the sensitive topics, the eating for two or just for you thing. Starting off, there's a really cool guide in the book with how much weight do you need to gain. If you're underweight across your whole pregnancy, it's 28 to 40 pounds. If you're normal weight, 25 to 35 pounds. If you're overweight, 15 to 25. If you're obese, 11 to 20. So if you're a very tiny lady, you need to gain more weight. If you have a little bit more mass, the amount of weight gain goes down. And then there's recommendations. Your doctor will talk to you about it, but how much weight do you need to gain per week during whatever trimester you're in? And then we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of training around your trimesters, which I thought this was like really good beta. I wish I would have had this like a year ago for my wife. But broken down into first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. First trimester, physically, you can kind of do anything you feel good to do because you haven't grown that much, you haven't gained that much weight, your ligaments aren't as loose as they're going to be.
Balance and coordination still feels pretty familiar.
Yep, so like your center of mass hasn't changed.
Yep.
But a decent number of women will have morning sickness, and that will definitely impact your ability to train. For my wife, up through like basically that ski trip or that ski day, she felt pretty good, and then soon after, that's when kind of the morning sickness started, and from week 12 to week 22 she felt pretty awful pretty much all the time. She'd have little windows where she felt good and she'd do a little bit of training, but that was a difficult period for her. Second trimester seemed like the honeymoon phase with pregnancy. Like she was starting to get a little bit of a belly, but she was through the morning sickness, so she was actually able to train pretty well. Her endurance definitely decreased, and from what you said earlier with the diaphragm, even a week ago, she says she still feels empty. Like she can feel everything kind of like moving around a little bit and like reorganizing itself. And recovering from pregnancy, just because that's where my wife is right now, it is wise to treat it like a serious injury. Like being pregnant's not bad. It's a great thing. Having a baby's a great thing. But it puts your body through a lot. So you don't want to rush back into activity. So same as if you had a serious injury, it's like a 9 to 12 month kind of recovery before you're back to what you were before you got pregnant. It just takes your body a long time to get back there. And then third trimester, that's where it gets harder because center of balance is different. Your joints are getting looser and looser kind of by the day. And like if you're a runner or a cyclist, you're going to slow down quite a bit. You've gained a significant amount of weight. And everything kind of throughout every trimester is based on RPE. So can you still train hard? Yes, relative to how you feel that day. So like Alex said, you're looking for that 7 out of 10 RPE, somewhere in that pocket. So you're not redlined, but you are working hard. And your 7 out of 10 in your third trimester would probably be comically easy in your first trimester. So just being aware of that makes sense. Is there anything else in that chapter you wanted to touch?
Yeah, one training tip that I thought was really interesting is Stacy recommends avoiding heavy supine exercise because it can compress some of the blood vessels that supply nutrients to fetus. So she said, if you're doing heavy bench press, put it on an incline. Doesn't mean you don't train those muscle groups. You just find a better modality to do it. And similarly, if you are doing things that require a lot of Valsalva, so those of you who don't know that term, basically trying to build intra-abdominal pressure by taking in a breath, squeezing and holding that. So think of like a heavy squat where you've got a bar on your back and you're trying to keep everything in your midsection stable. That has a similar effect as far as affecting blood flow to the fetus.
Got it.
So I thought that was really interesting. When I'm writing programs for pregnant clients in the future, that's definitely something I will consider. She also goes through a bunch of kind of myths and whether or not they still hold true or not throughout the chapter. I think if you get the book, it's definitely worth reading into some of that because they're things that you're probably going to hear. Like even things as simple as like, will running shake the baby? The answer is no, unless you're doing something incredibly intense, right?
Bombing down a mountain.
So for me, the take-home point is, yes, you can still train. Will you be able to chase PRs the whole time? No, of course not. And that's because you have, basically increased demands for oxygen, higher blood flow. It's harder on your cardiovascular system. You're moving around more weight than you're accustomed to. So obviously the same task will feel a little bit more demanding just because you weigh more. But by training, you're going to have a better basically better weight maintenance throughout, and you can increase your cardiovascular capacity to some degree. It's better for your baby in the long run. They even showed a study throughout the book that, I forget what the timeline was, but they looked at women who trained and women who didn't, and their babies even post-pregnancy, as they're growing, remained a little bit lighter than those who didn't. So there's a lower risk of like childhood obesity and diabetes, and for mom, there's a much lower risk. I think she said roughly 25% of gestational diabetes.
Huge.
So there's a lot of upside to training. You just have to be a little bit more nuanced on the way you train.
Yep. So to wrap it up, 2 thoughts: keep training, be smart.
Yep.
There you go. Thanks, guys.